She let an old homeless man shower in her bathroom. When he finished, she fainted when she sees. The city was a living organism, its pulse echoing through the streets with a constant rhythm of noise and movement. Towering skyscrapers pierced the sky, their glass facades reflecting the chaotic dance of urban life below. People moved with purpose, a blur of coats and scarves, as Harper navigated the familiar path to her office, blending seamlessly into the crowd. Harper was 29, with a mane of chestnut hair perpetually caught up in a messy bun, her bright eyes hidden behind stylish but functional glasses. She exuded a quiet confidence, the kind that came from years of balancing ambition with compassion. Her role as a financial analyst at a burgeoning tech company was both challenging and exhilarating. Each day presented new hurdles, tight deadlines, demanding clients, and the relentless pressure to outperform her peers. Yet, Harper thrived on it, finding a strange sense of satisfaction in solving complex problems and crafting strategies that propelled her company forward. Despite her professional success, Harper often felt like a cog in a relentless machine. The fluorescent lights of the office, the endless spreadsheets, and the constant buzz of activity left her drained by week's end. It was in these moments of exhaustion that Harper found solace in her volunteer work. Each Saturday, she traded her business attire for comfortable jeans and a sweater, spending her weekends at local shelters, where she offered a listening ear and a helping hand to those less fortunate. In these spaces, where warmth and empathy were the currency, Harper discovered a version of herself she cherished, a woman driven by kindness, who found purpose in the simple act of giving. The gratitude she encountered was humbling, a reminder of the stark contrasts between her two worlds. "You're a real saint, Harper," her coworker, Orion, often teased as they lingered over coffee in the break room. Orion was tall and affable, with a perpetual twinkle in his eye that made him instantly likable. He was one of the few people at work who knew about Harper's weekend endeavors, and he admired her dedication to a cause that was far removed from their high-stakes corporate environment. One rainy afternoon, as they sat together watching droplets race down the glass, Orion's voice broke the comfortable silence. "You know," he said, musing aloud, "sometimes helping someone else is the best way to find ourselves." The words resonated deeply with Harper, echoing her own introspections during quiet moments in the shelters. It was a sentiment that lingered in her thoughts, suggesting that her search for meaning and identity might be intrinsically linked to her acts of service. Orion's words stayed with her, weaving through her thoughts as she worked late into the evening, the office gradually emptying as colleagues departed. Harper found herself reflecting on the duality of her life. The fast-paced, competitive nature of her job contrasted sharply with the gentle, nurturing environment of her volunteer work. It was a balance she cherished, though she often wondered if she was truly making a difference. Winter wrapped the city in a frigid embrace, transforming routine commutes into battles against the elements. As the workday ended and night fell, Harper braced herself for the journey home, bundling up against the biting wind that cut through the streets like a blade. Her breath formed clouds in the icy air, and her footsteps echoed in the relative quiet of the evening. As she made her way down the familiar path, her gaze was drawn to a figure curled up on a bench, almost invisible beneath layers of tattered clothing. The figure was huddled against the cold, his body language a testament to the harshness of the night. Harper felt a pang of compassion and curiosity that compelled her to approach. "Excuse me," she said softly, not wanting to startle him. The man lifted his head, revealing a face lined with hardship, yet there was a spark of awareness in his eyes. "Are you all right?" Harper asked, her voice gentle but insistent. The man, who introduced himself as Jackson, nodded, though his shivering belied his words. Harper's heart ached at the sight of him, a stark reminder of the fragility of life. "It's freezing out here," she continued, searching his eyes for permission. "Would you like to come to my place for a warm meal and a hot shower?" Jackson blinked, his expression shifting from surprise to cautious hope. "Really? You do that?" he asked, his voice a blend of disbelief and gratitude. Harper nodded, offering a reassuring smile. "Of course. My apartment's just a short walk away. Let's get you out of this cold." As they set off together, Harper's mind raced with questions. What had led Jackson to this point? What stories lay behind his weary eyes? She felt an inexplicable connection to him, a sense that their paths had crossed for a reason she couldn't yet comprehend. As they walked side by side, the wind biting at their cheeks, Harper's thoughts swirled with uncertainty. Was it reckless to invite a stranger into her home? Her rational mind warned of potential dangers, yet her instincts told a different story. Jackson carried himself with a quiet dignity, even beneath the weight of his circumstances, and Harper couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to him than met the eye. "Why are you doing this?" Jackson asked, his voice barely audible over the wind that whipped around them. Harper paused, considering her response as they neared her apartment building, the warm glow of its lights promising refuge. "I guess I believe in second chances," she said thoughtfully, glancing at him. "Everyone deserves a little kindness now and then." As they reached the entrance, Harper's heart fluttered with a mix of apprehension and anticipation. She knew that by opening her door to Jackson, she was embarking on a journey whose outcome was uncertain. Yet, deep down, she felt that this moment marked the beginning of something significant, a chapter in her life that would challenge her perceptions and transform her understanding of connection and compassion. Together, they stepped inside, leaving the harshness of the winter night behind. In that moment, Harper sensed that her decision to trust her instincts would lead her to new revelations about herself and the world around her. The warmth of Harper's apartment enveloped them as they stepped inside, offering a sanctuary from the harsh winter outside. The living room was an oasis of comfort, with soft lighting casting a gentle glow over a space filled with personal touches. The scent of lavender lingered in the air from a nearby candle, and a plush throw draped over the couch beckoned with promises of warmth and relaxation. Jackson stood awkwardly by the door, his eyes scanning the cozy interior. It had been a long time since he had been in a place that felt like home. Harper, sensing his hesitance, offered a reassuring smile. "The bathroom is just down the hall. You can take your time," she said warmly. She retrieved a pair of her father's old sweatpants and a t-shirt, leaving them outside the bathroom door. As Jackson disappeared into the bathroom, Harper busied herself in the kitchen, preparing a simple but nourishing meal. She moved with practiced ease, her hands deftly chopping vegetables and stirring pots, the rhythmic sounds providing a soothing backdrop to her swirling thoughts. The encounter on the bench earlier that night had been unexpected, but Harper felt a strange sense of rightness about bringing Jackson home. There was a spark of familiarity in him that resonated deeply within her, tugging at the edges of her memory. As she waited for Jackson to finish, Harper's gaze settled on a photograph perched on the bookshelf. It was an image from her childhood, capturing a carefree moment with her father. She was on his shoulders, reaching for the sky, her laughter frozen in time alongside his broad smile. The photo stirred a familiar ache in Harper's heart. Her father had vanished from her life when she was young, leaving a void filled with unanswered questions. Her mother had told her he had died, but the details were always vague, as if there were secrets buried beneath her words. Growing up, Harper had often dreamed of finding him, of discovering the truth behind his disappearance. Her volunteer work, her drive to help others, had always felt like a search for something more. A connection, an understanding of the parts of her life that remained a mystery. The bathroom door creaked open, releasing a cloud of steam as Jackson stepped out. Harper turned from the stove, ready to welcome him to the dinner table. But as her eyes met his, she froze. The world seemed to stop as realization dawned on her. Jackson stood before her, his hair damp and neatly combed, his face clean-shaven. In that moment, Harper saw not just the stranger she had brought home, but a reflection of her father, a ghost from her past brought to life. The features were unmistakable, the eyes identical to the ones in her childhood memories. Her heart pounded in her chest, and a wave of dizziness swept over her. The room tilted, and she felt her knees buckle beneath her. The last thing she saw was Jackson's expression of shock and concern as she crumpled to the floor. Harper awoke to the sterile scent of antiseptic and the soft beeping of monitors. The hospital room was dimly lit, and as she blinked against the harsh overhead lights, she became aware of Jackson sitting beside her, his face etched with worry. "Harper, are you okay?" he asked, his voice filled with genuine concern. She nodded weakly, though her mind was still spinning with the revelation. She had found her father in the most unexpected of circumstances. At that moment, the doors swung open, and her neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, bustled in. A kindly woman in her 70s, Mrs. Alvarez had been the one to help Jackson get Harper to the hospital. "Oh, thank goodness you're awake, dear," she exclaimed, her voice a comforting balm. "You gave us quite a scare." Harper managed a faint smile, her mind still reeling. "I'm sorry for the trouble," she murmured, glancing at Jackson. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken questions. As Mrs. Alvarez left, promising to check on her later, Jackson turned to Harper, his expression a mixture of guilt and longing. "I owe you an explanation," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "I never intended to leave you," Jackson said, his eyes filled with regret. "Back then, I had dreams and ambitions. I started a company, but I made mistakes. I borrowed money from people I shouldn't have, and when everything fell apart, I thought the only way to protect you and your mother was to disappear." Harper listened, her heart aching with a complex mix of emotions. The father she had mourned for years was sitting beside her, and his story was one she had never imagined. "I didn't know how to fix things," Jackson continued, his voice cracking with vulnerability. "I thought you'd be safer without me. But as time passed, coming back felt impossible. I was ashamed, and I convinced myself you were better off without me." Tears welled in Harper's eyes as she absorbed his words, the truth of his struggle unfolding before her. She felt a mix of anger and empathy, understanding the fear that had driven him but mourning the years they had lost. "Why didn't you try to reach out?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jackson sighed, the weight of years pressing down on him. "Every time I thought about it, I was paralyzed by guilt. I didn't know if you'd want me back. I thought I'd only bring more trouble into your life." Harper reached out, her hand trembling as she placed it over his. "I would have wanted you," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "I needed you, Dad." The word hung in the air between them, a bridge spanning the gap of years. Jackson's eyes filled with tears, and he squeezed her hand gently. "I'm so sorry, Harper, for everything." They sat in silence, the room filled with the weight of shared history and newfound hope. Harper knew that rebuilding their relationship would take time, but she felt a flicker of possibility, a chance to mend what had been broken. As the first light of dawn crept through the window, Harper felt a sense of peace, knowing that despite the pain of the past, they had found each other again. In the quiet of the hospital room, she realized that her decision to help Jackson had not only brought him back into her life, but had also opened the door to forgiveness and healing. Together, they would face the challenges ahead, but for the first time in years, Harper felt she was no longer alone in her search for answers. The gentle hum of hospital equipment provided a comforting rhythm to Harper's thoughts as she lay in the quiet room, her father's presence a reassuring anchor beside her. It was a surreal feeling, having Jackson, her father, back in her life. Their reunion had been unexpected and emotional, and Harper found herself navigating a sea of conflicting emotions. The initial shock had given way to a sense of cautious hope. As they sat together, Jackson shared more about his life after he left, painting a picture of hardship and regret. He spoke of the years spent trying to stay one step ahead of the men he owed money to, living on the fringes of society, all the while hoping that one day he could return to his family. Harper listened intently, her heart aching for the struggles he had faced alone. It was a lot to process, but she found comfort in the fact that he was here now, willing to rebuild the relationship they had lost. "I never stopped thinking about you," Jackson said softly, his gaze fixed on her with a mix of longing and determination. "I've wanted to make things right for so long." Harper nodded, feeling a swell of emotion. "We can work on it together," she replied, squeezing his hand. "It's going to take time, but I want to try." Their conversation was interrupted by a nurse entering the room to check on Harper's vitals. The routine of hospital life provided a welcome distraction, allowing Harper time to reflect on the road ahead. She knew that mending their relationship would not be easy, but the possibility of reclaiming what they had lost filled her with hope. As Harper began her recovery, Reality encroached upon the fragile peace they had found. Jackson's past was not easily left behind, and the men to whom he owed money were relentless in their pursuit. They had tracked him to the city, their presence a shadow lurking just beyond the edges of Harper's new life. Jackson's demeanor changed as he sensed the threat drawing nearer. The lines of worry etched deeper into his face, and Harper noticed how he would frequently glance over his shoulder when they ventured outside. It was clear that his past had followed him, and the danger it brought was all too real. One afternoon, as they sat in a cafe discussing plans for the future, Jackson's phone buzzed insistently on the table. He glanced at the screen, his expression darkening as he read the message. "It's them," he muttered, slipping the phone back into his pocket. His voice was tight with tension, and Harper felt a chill run down her spine. "What do they want?" she asked, her voice steady despite the anxiety building within her. "They're demanding the money I owe," Jackson replied, his jaw set with determination. "They're not going to stop until they get it." Harper's mind raced, considering their options. She knew that they had to find a way to resolve this threat if they were ever to build a life free from fear. "We need a plan," she said, determination threading her voice. "We can't let them control our lives." As the days passed, the pressure mounted. Harper could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her, threatening to overwhelm the fragile progress they had made. Jackson's past was a constant presence, casting a long shadow over their newfound relationship. Despite their best efforts to stay one step ahead, the situation escalated. One evening, Harper returned to her apartment to find the door ajar, her belongings strewn about in disarray. Her heart pounded as she stepped inside, calling for Jackson. He emerged from the kitchen, his face pale and eyes wide with fear. "They were here," he said, his voice trembling. "They left a message." Harper's heart sank as she surveyed the damage, feeling the walls of her safe haven closing in around her. The threat was no longer just a distant possibility. It was a tangible danger that had invaded her home. She sank onto the couch, the weight of the situation crashing over her. Jackson sat beside her, his shoulders slumped with despair. "I'm so sorry, Harper," he said, his voice breaking with guilt. "I never wanted to bring this into your life." Harper shook her head, reaching for his hand. "We're in this together," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "We'll figure it out." But as the reality of their situation settled in, Harper couldn't shake the feeling of hopelessness that threatened to engulf her. She had thought that finding her father would bring answers and healing, but instead, it had brought chaos and danger. The path ahead seemed insurmountable, and for the first time, she questioned whether they could overcome the odds stacked against them. As Harper lay awake that night, her thoughts a tangled web of fear and uncertainty, she found herself reflecting on the journey that had led them here. The decision to bring Jackson into her home had felt right, a chance to make a difference, but now it seemed as if everything was unraveling. The questions that had haunted her for so long, about her father, about her place in the world, were more complicated than ever. But amidst the confusion and fear, a new resolve began to take shape. Harper realized that despite the challenges, she was not alone. She had found her father, and together, they could face whatever came their way. Determined to confront the threats that loomed over them, Harper resolved to take control of their fate. She would not let fear dictate their lives. With renewed determination, she began to formulate a plan, one that would require courage, resilience, and unwavering trust in each other. As the first light of dawn crept through the window, Harper felt a sense of calm wash over her. They had faced dark times before, and though the road ahead was uncertain, they were no longer walking it alone. Together, they would find a way to reclaim their lives and forge a new future. The weight of their financial struggles pressed heavily on Harper and Jackson as they faced the darkest moments of their journey. Harper felt the strain of constantly balancing her demanding job with the financial uncertainty at home. The bills continued to pile up, and every attempt to stretch her paycheck seemed futile. Despite the determination she and Jackson shared, there were days when Harper felt as though they were running in place, no closer to finding a solution than when they had started. The stress manifested itself in sleepless nights, where Harper lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind spinning with worry and doubt. I wish there was more I could do, Jackson said one evening as they sat together in the dim light of the living room, his voice heavy with frustration. I feel like I'm just a burden on you. Harper shook her head, reaching for his hand. You're not a burden, Dad. We're in this together, she said, trying to reassure both him and herself. We just have to keep pushing forward. But deep down, Harper felt the edges of despair creeping in. The relentless cycle of work and financial stress took its toll on her, sapping her energy and threatening to erode the hope she clung to so tightly. In the midst of their struggles, a flicker of opportunity appeared. Harper's friend and co-worker, Orion, had arranged a meeting with a community organization that specialized in job placement and financial counseling. Harper and Jackson attended a workshop together, eager for any guidance that could help them find a way forward. The workshop was held in a bright, welcoming space, filled with people from all walks of life who were facing similar challenges. The sense of camaraderie was palpable, a reminder that they were not alone in their struggles. The speaker, a woman named Lisa with a warm smile and an encouraging demeanor, shared stories of individuals who had overcome adversity to find stability and success. Her words resonated deeply with Harper and Jackson, reigniting the spark of hope within them. You have the power to change your story, Lisa said, her voice filled with conviction. It starts with taking the first step, and we're here to help you find your path. Inspired by Lisa's message, Harper and Jackson decided to take advantage of the resources offered by the organization. Jackson enrolled in a job training program focused on skills that were in high demand, while Harper signed up for financial counseling sessions to help them better manage their budget. The following weeks marked a turning point in their journey. Jackson threw himself into his training with determination, eager to prove himself and secure a stable job. The program was challenging, but he relished the opportunity to learn and grow, gaining confidence with each new skill he mastered. Harper, too, found strength in the support and guidance offered by the financial counselors. They helped her identify areas where she could cut expenses and develop a realistic budget that allowed for savings. The sense of control over their finances brought a newfound sense of security and peace. Slowly but surely, Harper and Jackson began to see the fruits of their labor. Jackson was offered a position with a local company, his hard work and dedication earning him the respect of his employers. The job provided a steady income, alleviating some of the financial pressure that had weighed so heavily on them. With Jackson employed, Harper felt a burden lifted from her shoulders. Together, they worked to build a new life, one where they could face challenges with resilience and hope. As they settled into their new routine, Harper reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. The obstacles they had faced had tested their strength and resolve, but they had emerged stronger and more united than ever. Their relationship had grown deeper, rooted in honesty and mutual support. Harper had discovered a new side of her father, a man who was willing to confront his past and forge a better future. She realized that the challenges they had faced had been an opportunity for both of them to grow and change. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony overlooking the city, Harper turned to Jackson, a smile playing on her lips. "We did it, Dad," she said, her voice filled with gratitude and pride. "We found our way." Jackson nodded, his eyes reflecting the joy and relief he felt. "I couldn't have done it without you," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "You gave me a second chance, and I'll never forget that." The final image of Harper and Jackson was one of quiet contentment, sitting side by side as the sun set over the city skyline. The vibrant colors of the sky mirrored the transformation they had undergone, a journey from darkness to light, from despair to hope. As they watched the world around them, Harper felt a sense of peace and fulfillment she hadn't experienced in years. She had found her father, and together, they had created a new chapter in their lives. The challenges they had faced had not defined them. Rather, they had strengthened their bond and reaffirmed their belief in the power of love and perseverance. The journey was far from over, but Harper knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, armed with the lessons they had learned and the strength they had found in each other.